The stars shone like silver fires across the endless sky of Selvaris. Great towers of crystal stretched into the heavens, glowing softly with light that came not from torches or wires, but from the living stones themselves. The royal city of Veltharis was a place of beauty, power, and pride. Here, beneath vaulted arches and halls that had stood for thousands of years, an event was unfolding that would shape the fate of two worlds. Princess Lysera of Selvaris stood on the marble steps of the grand hall, her silver gown flowing like liquid light. Her dark eyes were sharp, proud, and restless. She was admired by her people, feared by her enemies, and respected by every noble who dared to speak her name. But today, admiration and pride turned into whispers of disbelief. For beside her stood not a Selvarian noble, not a warrior of her people, but a man from Earth. His name was Captain Adrian Hale. To the Selvarians he looked plain. He had no crown of gold feathers, no shimmering tattoos that glowed with ancestral honor, no armor forged in starlight. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and carried himself with the straight posture of a soldier. But in the eyes of the Selvarian court, he was common, almost invisible in comparison to their shining grandeur. His simple black ceremonial uniform carried only the crest of Earth, a blue and white circle of unity. His hands were steady, his eyes calm, and his face unreadable. The marriage between Adrian and Princess Lysera was not born from love. It was born from necessity. For years, tension had grown between Earth and Selvaris. Skirmishes along the border of space, disputes over trade, and misunderstandings of culture had nearly led to war. Now this marriage was the fragile bridge between two proud civilizations. A single vow spoken here today could decide whether peace endured or whether blood would flow across the stars. The hall was filled with nobles, diplomats, and soldiers. The Selvarian high priest raised his crystal staff and began the ancient words of binding. The air shimmered with energy as the vow ceremony began, binding two lives into one. But even as the words filled the chamber, whispers hissed at the edges of the hall. Look at him, so plain. Is this truly the champion Earth sends? A common soldier for our princess? It is an insult. Adrian heard every word, though he gave no sign. He kept his gaze forward, his jaw steady. Lysera, however, felt each whisper like a thorn in her heart. She had expected her husband to be a noble, a hero of renown, perhaps a man with power equal to her own. Instead, she had been given this human, calm, silent, almost defiant in his stillness. As the vows ended, a soft pulse of light circled their joined hands, sealing the union. The crowd bowed, though not all with respect. The ceremony was complete. Lysera was now married to a man she barely knew, and worse, a man she could not yet understand. The celebration feast followed, though to Adrian it felt more like a trial. Long tables of crystal stretched beneath glowing chandeliers, filled with dishes from Selvaris, fruits that shimmered like stars, meats cooked in radiant heat, wines that sparkled with golden fire. Adrian sat beside Lysera at the high table, watching as nobles feasted and laughed. Yet their eyes kept darting toward him, some mocking, some curious, some cold. Lysera kept her gaze forward, speaking little to him. She raised her glass only when the toasts required it, her voice polite but distant. To her, this man was nothing more than a political tool, a placeholder to keep peace alive. She had no interest in knowing him beyond that. Adrian, however, was not blind. He watched the nobles carefully. He saw the way certain lords whispered behind jeweled hands, the way some guards at the edges of the hall shifted too often, their eyes sharp, their posture tense. He had been a soldier too long not to notice. This court was not at peace, it was waiting for something. When the feast ended, Adrian and Lysera were escorted through long halls of crystal toward their new chambers. Silence stretched between them. Finally, Lysera spoke, her voice edged with cold steel. "You carry yourself as if you belong here," she said. "Do you not see the whispers? Do you not know what they think of you?" Adrian's steps did not falter. His voice was steady, calm. "I hear them," he replied. "I see them. Their opinion changes nothing." Lysera turned her gaze sharply toward him. "You are not Selvarian. You are not noble. What strength do you have to stand here as my equal?" Adrian stopped. For the first time, he met her gaze fully. His eyes were steady, not angry, but filled with something she could not name. Resolve, confidence, unshakable calm. "I do not stand here because I am Selvarian," he said. "I stand here because I am human. and because your people and mine chose peace over war. You may not trust me yet, princess, but I am not here to bend. I am here to stand." Lysera blinked, startled. She had expected weakness, excuses, or perhaps silence. Instead, she found herself faced with a man who spoke not with pride, but with certainty. She said nothing more, though his words lingered in her thoughts as they entered their chambers. That night, Lysera stood by the balcony watching the stars. The city below shimmered with light, but her mind was restless. She thought of the nobles' whispers, of her people's pride, and of the human now tied to her life. Could such a man, so plain in appearance, truly hold the strength of a husband, an ally, or even a protector? Adrian, meanwhile, sat quietly at the edge of the chamber, his hand resting on the plain hilt of the sword he had carried from Earth. Few had noticed it at the ceremony. To the Selvarians it was nothing but a relic, a primitive blade in a galaxy where weapons fired beams of light. But to Adrian it was more than a weapon. It was a symbol, a memory of Earth's long history of struggle and survival, a reminder that even without power humans endured. He said nothing as Lysera watched the stars. He did not press her, did not try to explain himself. He simply remained silent but steady. In that silence, the first seed of curiosity stirred in Lysera's heart. Perhaps this man was not as common as he seemed. The days after the wedding passed slowly, but not without weight. Adrian Hale, the new husband of Princess Lysera, walked through the royal palace of Selvarus as though he belonged, though every glance told him otherwise. The palace was vast, a labyrinth of crystal halls and shining chambers, where every wall held carvings of Selvarian victories, and every corridor echoed with the steps of nobles who thought themselves superior to all other races. To Adrian, the palace was beautiful, but it was also a cage. Each day he faced whispers, sharp words dressed as politeness, and eyes filled with disdain. The Selvarian nobles had never been subtle. To them he was an outsider, worse, a human outsider. At the morning court, Lysera stood at her father's side, the aging Emperor Serathis. She wore her silver gown with pride, her head held high as petitions were heard from the noble houses. Adrian stood a few steps behind her, dressed in the black and blue of Earth's delegation. Though silent, his presence drew constant attention. "Your Majesty," said one noble, bowing low, "it wounds the honor of Selvarus to see our beloved princess bound to such a man. Is there truly no one among our kind worthy of her hand?" A ripple of murmurs passed through the hall. The Emperor's eyes narrowed, but he did not speak. Lysera, however, felt heat rise in her chest. She turned her gaze toward Adrian. He stood without moving, his expression calm, almost unreadable, as though the words had not touched him. Another noble, braver than the first, stepped forward. "We do not question Earth's usefulness as an ally, but surely if we must bind ourselves to humans, it would be better to honor one of their leaders? A commander of fleets, perhaps, or one with wealth and status. Why this common soldier?" The whispers grew sharper. Some laughed quietly. Others nodded in agreement. Lysera clenched her hands but said nothing. To speak would only show weakness. To argue would only make her seem defensive. And still Adrian remained silent. The Emperor finally raised his hand. "Enough," he said, his deep voice echoing through the chamber. "The marriage is done. The bond is sealed. Captain Hale stands here as family, and you will treat him as such." The nobles bowed, though not all with respect. Adrian inclined his head politely, but did not smile. When the court ended, Lysera turned to him as they walked through the long corridors. Her voice was sharp. "Why did you not speak? Do you not care what they say of you?" Adrian glanced at her, his dark eyes steady. "Words are wind, princess. I do not waste my strength chasing them." Lysera frowned. She wanted to tell him that silence looked like weakness, that the nobles would only grow bolder. But when she met his eyes, she saw no weakness there. Only patience and something else, control. That evening, Adrian walked alone through the palace gardens. The Selvarian moon hung low, casting silver light over trees with crystal leaves that sang softly in the wind. He breathed deeply, letting the quiet wash over him. But even here the whispers followed. A pair of young Selvarian nobles approached, their robes shining with embedded gems. Their smiles were sharp, their voices louder than needed. "Ah, the human prince," one said with a mocking bow. "Tell us, do all humans eat such plain food as you do? Or is it true that your people still farm the dirt with your bare hands?" The second laughed. "Perhaps he does not understand us. Do you speak our tongue, human? Or must we speak slowly for your ears? Adrian regarded them calmly. He did not answer at once, which only seemed to amuse them more. Finally, he said in clear, flawless Selvarian, "A farmer knows the value of soil, a soldier knows the weight of silence, and a fool knows only the sound of his own voice." The nobles' laughter stopped. Their faces tightened. For a moment, Adrian thought they might draw their blades, but they did not. They muttered something under their breath and left. Unseen by them, another figure watched from the shadows, Princess Lysera herself. She had followed Adrian to see what he would do when faced with scorn away from the court. What she saw surprised her. He had not lashed out, nor had he bowed his head. His words had been calm, sharp, and unshaken. She returned to her chambers that night thoughtful, her mind restless. The next day brought a formal banquet, where nobles from every house gathered to show their wealth and strength. Long tables were set with glowing fruits, golden wines, and dishes from across the empire. Musicians played soft notes on instruments of crystal and light. Lysera sat at the high table beside her husband. The nobles around them smiled politely, but their words dripped with venom. "Tell us, Captain," said Lord Valar, his voice sweet with false respect. "Is it true that humans still rely on machines to cook their meals? How primitive. Here on Selvaris, the stones themselves carry fire within them." Laughter followed. Another added, "And your weapons so crude. Bullets of metal, is that what you call them? Truly, I am amazed you survived long enough to reach the stars." The table roared with amusement. Lysera felt anger burn within her, though she kept her face composed. She expected Adrian to shrink beneath their scorn. Instead, he set down his glass slowly and looked at Lord Valar with calm eyes. "On Earth," Adrian said quietly, "we do not laugh at the tools of survival. A simple bullet has saved lives when nothing else could. A simple meal has kept families alive through winter. What you call primitive, we call tested. What you call crude, we call trusted." The laughter faltered. Some nobles exchanged uncertain looks. Lord Valar narrowed his eyes but said no more. Lysera felt a strange stirring in her chest. She had expected her husband to be silent again, or to stumble over words. Instead, he had spoken with steady strength, not boasting, not shouting, simply stating truth. For the first time, she wondered if she had judged him too quickly. Later that night, after the banquet ended, Lysera confronted Adrian in their chambers. "You do not rise to their insults," she said. "You do not bend to their scorn. Why?" Adrian placed his sword on the table, the plain human blade that never left his side. He looked at her with calm patience. "Because strength is not in loud voices," he said. "Strength is in knowing when to fight and when not to. If I answered every insult, I would be no better than they are." Lysera studied him for a long moment. His words made sense, yet they unsettled her. She had been raised to meet scorn with sharp replies, to match every word with fire. Yet this man's calm felt like something stronger than pride. Still, she turned away, unwilling to admit aloud that she was impressed. Unseen by both of them, darker shadows moved in the palace. Not all nobles were content to whisper. Some had begun to plot. In secret halls beneath the crystal towers, figures gathered, their eyes gleaming with ambition and fear. "The human is dangerous," one hissed. "He is not weak as we believed. Already he turns whispers against us." "Then we must act," another replied, "before the princess sees in him more than she should." Plans were drawn, voices hushed. And somewhere deep within the palace walls, a knife was being prepared for the shadows yet to come. That night, as Adrian sat alone polishing his sword, he felt the weight of unseen eyes. He knew the court was dangerous. He knew the whispers were only the beginning. But he was not afraid. He had faced worse than whispers. And soon he would face much more. The great hall of Selvaris glowed with crystal light as nobles gathered for the mid-season gala, a celebration meant to honor the bond between Earth and Selvaris. Musicians filled the air with soft melodies, while trays of jeweled fruits and sparkling wine moved between the guests. Every corner of the hall glittered, but beneath the beauty there was tension. Smiles were sharp, whispers sharper, and every eye turned again and again to the human standing beside Princess Lysera. Captain Adrian Hale looked plain among them still. He wore the formal uniform of Earth, black with silver trim, and carried no sign of Selvarian nobility. Yet his calm face and steady posture seemed to draw as much attention as the princess herself. Lysera, standing tall in her gown of silver threads, pretended not to notice the eyes that followed her husband. But inside she felt restless. For weeks now, Adrian had endured the court's scorn without faltering. He did not rise to their insults, nor did he show fear. Lysera had begun to wonder what secret strength kept him so steady. Tonight she hoped to glimpse the answer. The feast began with laughter and speeches. Nobles raised their cups, praising the greatness of Selvarus, offering only faint words for earth. Adrian listened quietly, sipping from his glass but saying little. Lysera sat beside him, her gaze sweeping the room. It was then she noticed something strange. Near the pillars stood guards, but not the ones she knew by name. Their armor was correct, but their eyes were too sharp, too restless. One hand twitched near the hilt of a blade, though no threat had been given. Lysera's heart quickened. She leaned slightly toward Adrian, her voice low. "Do you see them?" she whispered. Adrian's eyes flicked once toward the pillars, then back to the table. His voice was calm. "Yes." Lysera almost asked what he would do, but before she could speak, the attack began. With a sudden cry, 3 figures lunged from the shadows. Blades of energy flashed as they charged toward the high table. The false guards at the pillars moved too, drawing weapons and striking at those who tried to rise. Screams filled the hall. Nobles stumbled back, knocking over tables and goblets of glowing wine. The true guard struggled to react in time, caught off guard by betrayal. The Emperor himself rose slowly, his voice booming commands. But chaos spread too quickly, and in the middle of that storm, Adrian moved. He rose from his chair with calm swiftness, his hand falling to the hilt at his side. The plain sword he had carried from earth slid free with a clean ringing sound. The blade gleamed silver under the crystal light, not humming with energy, not glowing with power, only sharp and real. To the Selvarians, it was primitive. To Adrian, it was enough. The first assassin struck at Lysera. Adrian stepped forward, his sword flashing. Metal met energy in a clash that sparked bright, and with one precise twist, he sent the assassin's blade flying. His second strike was swift and final, sending the attacker sprawling across the floor. Gasps filled the hall. Nobles froze, their eyes wide, for the common human moved like a master. His feet were steady, his strikes controlled, his eyes unshaken. A second assassin leapt from the table, blade raised high. Adrian turned, deflecting the strike with his sword, then struck with the hilt against the attacker's chest. The force sent the figure crashing backward into a table, shattering crystal plates and scattering glowing fruit across the floor. The third came from behind. Lysera cried out, but Adrian was already moving. He twisted, his blade sweeping in a clean arc that caught the assassin's weapon and cut through its handle. In one motion, he drove the attacker to the ground, pressing the flat of his sword against the fallen one's neck. Silence fell for a heartbeat. The nobles stared in disbelief. The human had not stumbled. He had not hesitated. He had fought with skill older than Selvarus itself, skill honed in Earth's long history of war, battle, and survival. But it was not over. The false guards at the pillars charged, their energy weapons raised. Adrian stepped forward, placing himself between Lysera and the threat. One guard fired. The beam shot through the air, but Adrian deflected it with a sharp strike of his sword, the blade glowing faintly from the heat, yet holding strong. He charged forward, closing the distance before the enemy could fire again. His blade cut in swift, controlled motions, never wild, never wasted. Within moments, the false guards fell, disarmed and defeated. The hall stood in stunned silence. The music had died, the laughter gone. Nobles who had once mocked the human now stared with wide eyes, unable to speak. Even the Emperor himself watched with quiet awe. Lysera's heart pounded. She had always thought of her husband as calm, perhaps stubborn, but nothing more. Now she had seen him move like a storm. Every motion had been precise, disciplined, filled with a strength that no noble of Selvarus could dismiss. Slowly, Adrian lowered his sword. His breath was steady, his eyes scanning the hall for danger. When no more attackers came, he turned to Lysera. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head, still stunned. No, I'm not." Adrian nodded once, then stepped back, his blade still in hand. The attackers were dragged away by the true guards, though some had already fallen unconscious. The Emperor rose from his throne, his voice firm. This was no mere attack, he said, his eyes narrowing. This was betrayal from within. Whispers broke out among the nobles. Fear and anger filled the room. But through it all, every gaze kept drifting back to the human with the sword. Lysera looked at Adrian again. She remembered the scornful words of the nobles, The laughter at his presence, the endless whispers calling him common. She remembered her own doubts. And now, standing beside him, she felt them crumble. He was no ordinary man. He was no weak husband forced upon her. He was a warrior, a protector. And though she did not say it aloud, part of her felt safer than she had in years. That night, in the privacy of their chambers, Lizera finally spoke. "You fought as though you had faced such things 100 times before," she said softly. Adrian cleaned his blade with a cloth, the metal shining under the lamp. His voice was quiet, steady as always. "I have. Not here, not against your kind, but on Earth. Humanity has fought countless battles. We have bled, endured, and survived when all odds said we should fall. This sword is a part of that history. Every strike I made tonight was not mine alone. It carried the weight of generations." Lizera studied him. The man she had once thought common was now a mystery she could not ignore. She saw the calm in his eyes, the quiet strength in his hands, and the unshakable resolve in his words. "You are not what I thought you were," she admitted. Adrian met her gaze, his voice calm but firm. "And you are not what I thought either. Perhaps we will both learn." For the first time, Lizera smiled faintly. A small smile, but real. Beyond the palace walls, however, shadows still moved. The failed attack was only the beginning. Those who plotted against the throne had not been destroyed, only delayed. And now, they feared not only the princess, but the human who stood at her side. The court of Selvaris would never again call him common. But in their fear, they would begin to see him as something else, something dangerous, and danger was only the start. The palace was quiet after the chaos of the mid-season gala. Night had settled across Veltharis, casting silver shadows over the crystal towers. Even the streets below seemed to hold their breath. Princess Lysera sat by the balcony, her silver gown catching the moonlight, and watched the city stretch beneath her. Her mind was restless, filled with images from the evening, the sudden attack, the flash of steel, and the calm, precise movements of her husband. Captain Adrian Hale, the man she had once thought common, now seemed anything but ordinary. Yet she did not know him, not truly. She had seen his skill, his discipline, his courage, but she did not know where it had come from, what shaped him, or why he had endured so calmly when everyone else had panicked. Adrian entered the balcony quietly, closing the door with soft care. He stood beside her, his posture straight, his face calm under the moonlight. For a moment, neither spoke. Finally, Lysera broke the silence. "You did not speak of yourself at all during the attack. No one knew what you were capable of, except me now. Why did you remain silent? Why not show them who you are?" Adrian's eyes followed the distant glow of the city. "Because it is not enough to simply show skill," he said. "Skill alone does not earn respect, and strength without purpose is empty. I needed them to see more than the sword. I needed them to see that I will not falter. That is what matters most." Lysera frowned, still trying to understand him. "But you are more than a soldier," she said. "There is something in you. Something different. You fight like someone who has lived many lifetimes." Adrian turned to her, his dark eyes steady. "You are not wrong, princess. There is more to me than what I have shown." She leaned closer, curiosity shining in her eyes. "Then tell me. I need to know who you really are." Adrian took a slow breath as though weighing his words. "I am no simple soldier sent to bind a political treaty. I am a veteran of Earth's forces, yes, but chosen for more than skill. Humanity has faced countless threats, both on Earth and among the stars. I have been trained not just in combat, but in diplomacy, strategy, and endurance. The leaders of Earth did not choose me for my rank, my wealth, or my appearance. They chose me for my character, for my ability to act when others would falter." Lysera's eyes widened. "So, you were chosen because of who you are, not what you have?" Adrian nodded. "Exactly. And not just to marry a princess. I was chosen to protect her and to protect the fragile peace between our worlds. There are those who do not want Earth and Selvaris to stand together. If the balance shifts, war will follow. My role is to ensure that does not happen." Lysera was silent for a moment, absorbing his words. Everything about him, his calm, his precision, his courage, now made sense. He was not common. He was human at his finest, resourceful, strong, and steadfast. "You never told me this," she said softly. "Why?" "Because you needed to see the truth for yourself," Adrian replied. "Words are easy. Actions are harder. Tonight you saw what humans can do, but even that is only part of it. There is more work to be done, and I cannot fight battles that cannot yet be named. Lysera studied him closely. She had been trained to read people, to detect even the smallest sign of deception. But with Adrian, there was none. Only honesty, quiet and unwavering. Slowly she reached out, placing her hand on his arm. I underestimated you, she admitted. I thought you were just a human, ordinary and weak. But now I see that was wrong. You are extraordinary. Adrian's lips curved in a small, faint smile. And you are wiser than you realize, Princess. Perhaps that is why we were meant to face this together. The following days were tense. The palace was alive with whispers, cautious glances, and guarded conversations. The failed attack at the gala had shaken the nobles, but it had not destroyed their ambition. Some still plotted, though carefully, knowing that the human now wielded not just skill but respect. Adrian and Lysera began spending more time together, though always in public, always with the walls of protocol surrounding them. Still, Lysera could not help noticing small gestures, how Adrian quietly checked the defenses of the palace, how he spoke to guards with patience and respect, and how he studied the movements of nobles with a strategist's mind. One afternoon they walked through the palace gardens. The trees with crystal leaves shimmered in the sunlight, and soft breezes carried the distant music of fountains. Lysera turned to him. Do you ever tire of this? She asked. Of standing in a palace full of whispers and scorn, of always having to prove yourself? Adrian shook his head. No, I have faced far worse than whispers. The truth is, Princess, I am here because I choose to be. I fight not for glory or praise, but because it is right. That is how humans endure. We face what must be faced, even when others doubt us. Lysera looked at him with a new sense of admiration. His words were not boastful, they carried weight, honesty, and a moral strength she had never seen before. You truly are different from everyone else here, she said. He glanced at her, his expression calm. And you, Princess, are different from what I expected. You have strength as well, though it hides behind duty and pride. Together we can face what is coming. That evening the palace grew tense again. Reports arrived that the conspirators from the gala were regrouping. Some noble families had secretly allied with outsiders, hoping to seize power while the emperor and princess were distracted. Adrian convened a small council in the privacy of their chambers. Lysera listened as he explained his plan. The palace is not fully secure, he said. Some of the guards may be compromised. We cannot trust all who walk these halls. I have already set measures to protect you, but more must be done. Tonight I will walk the corridors, check the defenses, and ensure that nothing escapes my notice. Lysera watched him, awed. You do all this alone? Not alone, he replied. I have allies among the guards, loyal ones, and soon you will see that humans are nothing if not resourceful. As the night deepened, Adrian moved silently through the palace. Every corridor, every hidden alcove, every shadow was under his watchful eye. He found signs of tampering with locks, subtle marks on walls that suggested someone had tried to hide passageways. Nothing escaped him. Not a whisper, not a shadow, not the faintest sign of betrayal. Hours passed, and the palace remained quiet. When Adrian returned to Lysera's chambers, she had remained awake, waiting. You could have rested, she said softly. Rest is for those who are safe, he replied. I am not safe until you are. And I will not let anyone harm you. Lysera's eyes filled with something she had not felt before. Trust, admiration, and a faint stir of something deeper. She realized with a shock that she had begun to care for this human, not just for his skill or courage, but for his heart. You truly are extraordinary, she whispered. Adrian looked at her calmly. I am only human. But humans endure. That is our gift. For a long moment they stood together in silence. Outside, the palace hummed with the quiet energy of night. The stars above Selvaris seemed brighter than ever, as if the universe itself had noticed the bond forming between them. Lysera finally turned away, though she kept her thoughts close. She had learned something vital tonight. Her husband was no ordinary man. He was a human at his finest, loyal, brave, and steadfast. And she knew, without question, that the peace of Selvaris now rested not just on the strength of her people, but on the strength of the man beside her. And somewhere deep in the palace, the shadows of conspiracy moved. They would test them again. But tonight, for the first time, Lysera felt that she had a warrior at her side. Someone who could face the darkness and protect not just her, but the fragile bond between worlds. The first light of Selvaris's twin suns crept over the crystal towers, casting long shadows across the palace. The city was unusually quiet, but beneath the silence, tension pulsed like a hidden current. Princess Lysera stood on the balcony of her chambers, watching the streets below. Her silver gown shimmered in the early light, but she did not notice. Her mind was filled with thoughts of what Adrian had told her the night before. The conspirators had regrouped. They were still plotting to seize the throne and undo the fragile peace between Earth and Selvaris. Adrian approached quietly from behind. He had been walking the corridors all night, ensuring the palace was secure. His sword hung at his side, gleaming even in the soft morning light. Lysera turned to him. "Do you think they will strike today?" she asked. "Soon," Adrian said calmly. "We are ready, but the palace alone cannot stop them. Tonight they will test us," Lysera's heart pounded. Though she had seen Adrian fight, she had never faced the thought of battle alongside him. Yet she trusted him completely. "We face them together," she said firmly. Adrian nodded. Yes, together. The palace guards were called to their stations. Loyal Selvarian soldiers moved through the halls, and Earth's delegation had sent specialists to assist. Adrian and Lysera stood at the center of command, directing operations. Every corridor was mapped, every passage checked. Despite their preparation, the human and the princess both knew that conspirators had ways to slip through the shadows. The attack came sooner than expected. From the western towers, alarms blared. Figures cloaked in black surged forward, brandishing energy blades and small projectile weapons. The conspirators had allied with outsiders, mercenaries who had no loyalty, only the promise of reward. The palace erupted into chaos. Adrian did not hesitate. His sword was drawn in a fluid motion, catching the first attacker's weapon. Sparks flew as metal clashed against energy. Each strike was precise, controlled, every movement calculated. He moved with speed and discipline, shielding Lysera and guiding loyal guards. Lysera watched, her breath catching as she saw the human she had once thought ordinary become something extraordinary. Adrian's sword seemed almost alive in his hands, cutting through the enemies with skill that none in Selvaris had imagined possible. But it was not just strength that mattered. Adrian's mind was sharp, predicting attacks before they happened. He shouted directions to the guards, placing them where they were most needed, turning the tide of battle with both strategy and skill. Lysera felt a surge of courage. She realized she could not remain passive. Drawing a small ceremonial dagger, she moved alongside Adrian, helping to deflect attacks and guide trapped nobles to safety. Though she had never wielded a weapon in battle, she fought with determination, inspired by Adrian's bravery and calm. The conspirators pressed forward relentlessly. Adrian's sword met theirs again and again. He disarmed one attacker with a swift twist, then turned to block a projectile aimed at Lysera. Each moment tested both his endurance and precision, yet he never faltered. Even the palace itself seemed to respond to him. Doors closed automatically, sealing hallways where enemies could not escape. Crystal panels glimmered and reflected sunlight into the corridors, blinding attackers for moments that were enough for Adrian to strike. Hours passed like minutes in the battle. The conspirators began to falter, their confidence shaken by the unexpected skill of the human warrior. Loyal guards rallied behind Adrian, inspired by his fearlessness. Even some nobles who had doubted him found themselves standing taller, drawn by the courage he displayed. Lysera saw something remarkable. Adrian fought not for glory, not for recognition, but for protection, of her, of the palace, and of the fragile alliance between worlds. Every strike of his blade carried a message. Humans may seem ordinary, but their resolve and heart make them extraordinary. Finally, the last of the attackers fell. Some had been captured, others fled, terrified by the skill and determination of the human who had faced them alone. Silence returned to the palace. The halls were scarred, but the throne was safe, the princess unharmed, and peace for now restored. The emperor, Cerathus, descended from his throne. He moved toward Adrian, his face a mixture of awe and respect. "Captain Hale," he said, his deep voice echoing through the hall. "I see now that I have judged too quickly. Your courage, skill, and leadership, they surpass what we could have imagined. You have saved not just my daughter, but the very heart of Selvaris. Adrian bowed politely. I only did what needed to be done, Your Majesty. Selvaris and Earth are stronger together, and I serve that unity. Lysera stepped forward, her silver gown flowing behind her. She took Adrian's hand, holding it firmly. You have proven something the entire court doubted, she said. You are not common, you are everything I did not expect, and perhaps everything I need. Adrian met her gaze, his calm eyes softening just slightly. And you, Princess, have shown strength of your own. Your courage and intelligence guided this palace through chaos. Together, we are stronger than any enemy. In the following days, the court of Selvaris changed. Nobles who had mocked Adrian now whispered words of respect, though some still struggled with disbelief. The common human had fought like no one they had ever seen, wielding a simple sword with unmatched skill and leading both humans and Selvarians with authority. Lysera watched him with new eyes. The man she had once dismissed as ordinary had become her partner in every sense, protector, strategist, and companion. She realized that strength came not from titles, appearances, or wealth, but from courage, intelligence, and heart, qualities that Adrian had in abundance. Together, they walked through the palace halls side by side. Loyal guards bowed respectfully, and nobles no longer whispered scorn. The alliance between Earth and Selvaris was stronger than ever, founded not just on treaties, but on shared respect and bravery. Adrian and Lysera met in the palace gardens as the twin suns set, painting the crystal trees with golden light. The city below glimmered, alive with energy and hope. Lysera turned to him. Do you realize what you have done? She asked. You have not only saved the palace, but also changed how my people see humanity. Adrian shook his head gently. I only did what any human would do. We endure, we protect, we act when it matters most. That is what you saw. The rest is history waiting to be written. Lysera smiled, a smile full of pride and trust. History indeed, she said softly. And I want to face it with you. They stood together in the garden, the sword at Adrian's side catching the last rays of sunlight. It was a symbol now, not just of skill, but of unity, trust, and strength. A human who had been called common had become the very heart of Selvaris's protection, and in doing so, had won the respect of a civilization and the admiration of a princess. The conspirators had been defeated, but lessons remained. The court learned that appearances could be deceiving, that courage and intelligence mattered more than wealth or rank, and that humans, though simple in appearance, could wield strength beyond imagination. Princess Lysera no longer saw Adrian as a common man. She saw a warrior, a protector, and a partner, and Adrian, standing beside her, knew that humanity's true power was not just in weapons or skill, but in loyalty, courage, and the unyielding will to protect what is right. The palace gates of Selvaris closed peacefully that night. For the first time in many weeks, the city could breathe without fear. And at the center of it all stood a human with a sword, and a princess who had learned that sometimes the most extraordinary things come in the simplest forms. Together, they had faced danger, forged trust, and proven that the bond between Earth and Selvaris was stronger than any shadow, any plot, and any doubt. The common human was no longer common. He was history, and history had just begun.